Thank you so much, and I'm going to I thank you so much for your time with us, and I apologize sincerely for the laptop. I always tell my family and friends that I'm an embarrassment to the South Asian community, not because I'm gay, because I can't work a computer. So there's that. So thank you so much for your patience. We have some microphones here, so I'll introduce you to our moderator for the evening, Douglas Elliott. And Douglas Elliott is a partner in Cambridge LLP and lead counsel for the class action. He received his BA from the University of Western Ontario in 1979, his LLB from the University of Toronto in 1982, and was called to the bar in 1984. The Law Society certified him as a specialist in civil litigation in 2003 and awarded him the Law Society Medal in 2010. And Doug is a recognized expert on LGBT rights, constitutional law, and class actions, and he was the lead author on the Justice Society report. Doug also won the Hislop v. versus Canada class action, which is the largest LGBT class action concerning LGBT rights to date. And Mr. Elliott is well known for his work on landmark constitutional cases such as same-sex marriage, and is also a leader in the field of class actions. And Mr. Elliott won the largest Canadian class action trial judgment valued at $50 million in an action brought by a group of gay and lesbian Canadians seeking CPP survivors' pension against the federal government in Hislop versus Canada. He played a key role in the National Hepatitis C team that secured a $1.5 billion settlement for the federal and provincial governments in Parsons versus Canada, one of the largest settlements in Canadian class action history. And in addition to numerous awards for his social justice work, Mr. Elliott has been recognized as a leading expert on public law, both class actions and charter litigation, and is one of the best class action lawyers in Canada by the Best Lawyers in Canada. He is also listed in Canadian Who's Who, published by the University of Toronto Press. And more importantly, Doug and his husband Greg live in Elliott Lake, Ontario, with their new dog. And so I'll hand it over to Douglas Elliott and to our panelists.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that kind and a little overly long introduction, but thank you. I should mention that that description is slightly out of date. The Hislop case was the largest. Was the largest LGBT financial recovery historically until the LGBT purge class action, where we recovered $145 million. I'd like to say about the LGBT purge class action that sometimes justice delayed is still justice. So I had the pleasure of serving many wonderful class members as part of that, and some of them are here with us today. I want to come on up. Lynn, Todd, Lynn, Wayne. Roxanne, are you joining us? There's a bunch of people here who are also in the film. We've got some people here who weren't in the film. I want to say a couple of things about the film before we get started. First of all, the film was a happy accident. Sarah Fody is a brilliant filmmaker, and she took it upon herself to do this project while we were working away on these issues legally. We didn't commission her to do it. I found out she was doing it in the middle of the class. When she was interviewing me, you will have heard me talking about negotiating with the federal government. The case was still going on when she was doing her filming. But it's a brilliant piece of education. We've learned new things since then. Sven Robinson is incognito at the back of the room there and behind his mouth. If you come tomorrow to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, you're going to hear some of the things that we've learned through Sven's excellent work digging through the documents, some updates that we have. Two that I'll mention right now. One is that we thought, you'll have heard me say there, that we thought that as many as 9,000 people were under investigation. Sven has now determined that there were at one time 30,000 files on LGBT Canadians who were under surveillance by their own government. You will have also heard me say in the film that I thought that people at the top maybe were unaware of what the RCMP was up to. But we have since learned that in one of the most high-profile cases, that of John Watkins, who died under interrogation by the RCMP in Dorval in 1964, that investigation was well known to Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson at the time, and that in fact there's a good case for saying that Prime Minister Pearson was actually directing that investigation of Mr. Watkins. So there's some more skeletons to come out of the closet yet, and if there's no greater expert about coming out of the closet than Sven Robinson. He's going to get all those skeletons out, I'm quite sure. I wanted to mention that Sarah's process was very organic. We now have the Rainbow Veterans of Canada, that is a wonderful organization, and Todd, who's here, and our colleague Diane Pitre are the co-chairs of Rainbow Veterans of Canada. But at the time the film was being made, none of these people knew each other, or except by chance. There was no place for them to gather together. And so when Sarah was interviewing people, she was just sort of tripping across them, a friend of a friend, and so on. And so you don't necessarily get a balanced picture of, so some people who aren't, you'll see some people up here who weren't interviewed in the movie, and it's not because they refused to be interviewed or Sarah wasn't interested in interviewing them. She just came across people who knew each other. So there's a little bit of slight overemphasis on lesbians in the armed forces. That definitely was a big problem for sure, but it's just the people that Sarah, when I say big problem, I don't mean that the lesbians were a problem, I mean they had a big problem. The lesbians were great soldiers, believe me. Look, if I was in trouble, I'd call for the lesbian soldiers. But I wouldn't want you to be left with the impression that the purge was all about the armed forces or all about lesbians. It was broader than that. It went on for a very long time, from early 1950s until 1992. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention, that this year is a very significant year because in October we will mark the 30th anniversary of the end of this evil policy. And the end of that policy is thanks to the courage and determination of just one young lesbian. She's not quite as young anymore, but she's still brilliant and courageous, and that's Michelle Douglas. She did go to work for the government of Canada, as we saw there. I think she, as I said earlier today, I think she holds the record for the employee who's most often sued their employer over the years. But eventually, she peacefully retired the second time from the government of Canada, and we're now very pleased and honored to have Michelle as the executive director of the LGBT Purge Fund. And so she is busy doing a number of projects to memorialize the LGBT purge, and you'll learn more about that if you come to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights tomorrow. So, let me introduce our panel, all people that I love and admire, and I know that it will be absolutely brilliant. So right here is my friend, Professor Lynn Goliker, who you saw in the film, who is not just a purge survivor, but she's also done some really important academic work on the LGBT purge. And she was really, I can tell you that when we were working up the class action, her and her partner did some really critical research for us that was exceptionally hopeful in getting a just result for all of the survivors. So thank you to you and Carmen for that work. And next to Lynn, and I should say Lynn also is significant because we're here in the heart of the Métis Nation, that Lynn is also a proud Métis person. And next to Lynn is another proud Métis person, my dear friend and my client in the LGBT purge class action, Todd Ross, who is now living in St. Andrew, New Brunswick, where he lives with his longtime companion, Kirk, who is struggling to retire from teaching, as I am struggling to retire from law. And over here is my other client, the other lead representative plaintiff in the class action, Martine Roy, who lives in Montreal with her lovely wife and their 2 kids. She's no longer working at IBM, she's now at TD, where she's in charge of the LGBT work of TD in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. She's also the chair of the LGBT Purge Fund. And I want you to know that this whole class action project had a huge amount to do with these 2 folks and one magical day in June of 2016 when we announced the Just Society report, and Todd cried on national television before my eyes about it, told his story publicly. I had known him for more than 10 years at that point, the first time I heard the story, and I was absolutely gobsmacked and was horrified and wanted to do something. Then I went to lunch, and Martine sat beside me and said, I've been trying to find a lawyer to sue the government. You think we can do something? We did something. we did something really good. And then over there in the corner, the shy and retiring Wayne Davis, Wayne is on the board of directors of the LGBT Purge Fund. The LGBT Purge Fund is managing millions of dollars, and I want you to know that, thank God, we've got Wayne Davis on the board of directors, who is an expert at this kind of thing, because we have the greatest confidence in his management skills and his administrative talents. He's really been a godsend to us. But Wayne is, I really wanted to have Wayne on this panel because there's one significant gap in Sarah's movie. In Sarah's movie, you would get the impression that the RCMP were always the victimizers of the LGBT community. But Wayne was a gay cop. He worked for the RCMP and he was purged. So sometimes the RCMP were also the victims of the LGBT purge. So, we're going to start, and I'm actually, because people don't know Wayne's story, I'm going to start with Wayne. So Wayne, tell us, why don't you start off and tell us how this lad from Drumheller, Alberta, home of the Royal Tyrrell. How did, yes, there's a few dinosaurs in Alberta. Some of them are in the Senate of Canada, actually. But tell us about what got you interested in going into the RCMP, Wayne.
My story is probably a typical prairie couple of my buddies were joining the RCMP, and I thought, well, that would be a pretty good career. So, yeah, that was the day when the RCMP were greatly admired. We were a little terrified, but looked up to the cops in a small town in Alberta. So I thought, well, that would be a pretty good career to get out, and Mom would be pleased that I was out from under her feet. So my two buddies and I went off to join the RCMP. I was encouraged by them because their dad was a Mountie and it was going to be a good thing to do. So off we went, and one of my buddies flunked the entrance exam and the other guy was colorblind. So there's still in Drumheller. And I had a career of 17 years in the RCMP until it abruptly stopped as a result of the purge, but no regrets.
You also had a career in heterosexuality for a period of time as well.
Oh goodness. Actually much longer than one would think. But it's a very interesting thing. I'm the classic boomer, closeted gay man. I had no frame of reference for my sexuality when I was young. I lived in a small town. I sensed something was different, didn't know what it was. Everyone was getting married. I think, well, that's the thing I should be doing after I joined the RCMP. Everyone was getting married. I had a lovely girl. She's still the love of my life, as a matter of fact. We're still very close. But yes, and it really, I'm sort of the textbook of the closeted gay man that just went along with what society dictated, and I'm just so thrilled that young people today don't have to do that.
And eventually you did figure out that you were gay, and you were posted in Toronto, and you started going out to gay clubs and having a good time, and that's what ended up causing you some difficulties with the RCMP. So tell us about that.
Yes, I had a very good career in the RCMP, rapidly promoted, a 17-year career. My last posting was as a staff sergeant in Toronto, in charge of finance for the division. I was actually, to be modest, I was the golden boy of the RCMP, waiting to go into the officers, the next level of promotion in the RCMP. And one day I was simply called into the office, or my boss's office, on a Monday morning, and he said, you were seen in a gay bar in the weekend. And I guess the closet, and I said this once to Michelle, the closet is a very, very tiny space, and I think I was getting a little tired of being in that space, and oddly confident that, well, this is my friend, my boss, he's asking me a question. I answered the question. I said I was in a gay bar because I'm gay. So I had the choice of resigning or being fired, as long as I was out of the office by the end of the day. And that's in 1985. In 1985. And that was well, quite a shock to me. But I guess I was ready. I was ready because it was painful, but I was somehow free. And very fortunate in that I was that closet 8 to 4, gay 4 to 8 the next morning. So I had a very strong community of support that got me through it. That within our own community, it was there. And I had some very good friends within the RCMP, mainly public service friends, but they were there for me. So, yeah. And I watched what some people went through as part of the purge, and I count myself oddly fortunate. Because it's ridiculous, to say the least. I'm sitting here wondering if my legs should be crossed like this now. I'm suddenly very self-conscious. And then... In the interest of time, I'll just mention that, interestingly, Wayne ended up landing on his feet and got another government job shortly thereafter. But I just want people to remember 1985, as Sven will remember very well, by this time,
Section 15 of the Charter of Rights has come into effect, and supposedly it's unconstitutional to discriminate against us. And just before I move on to Martin, Wayne, if you don't mind sharing this, one of the things that we got as part of the settlement was people got access to their own personnel files. And when you got your file, you discovered something that really rather surprised you about your dismissal, didn't you?
It did rather surprise me, and I would just like to give a shout out to my savior, who has been many people's savior, Sven, because he did, the same summer as I laid off, invite me to a parliamentary committee to give evidence about my purging. And as he was having trouble finding RCMP members that would come forward, and that was a very big part of my healing, because I was able to share it with people that obviously cared. They were there trying to see that the system worked. But as part of the class action, we did get our files, and it was odd at the time because I knew from the Parliamentary Commission that the Commissioner had a very strong view and had put forward an aid memoir saying this is absolutely verboten. But I had a note on my file. My boss had sent in a letter saying, I found a faggot and I fired him. Basically was the essence of his report to headquarters. And then they sent that letter back to, from the administrative officer that received it to the head of personnel, saying, why are we treating Staff Sergeant Davis differently from other members in similar circumstances? We don't have a policy on homosexuality. And I was caught right in the cusp of the change. But what is more typical of the time was the action they took. The next question was, what do we do now? And the answer was nothing, because the member resigned. I guess they didn't understand the concept of constructive dismissal. And the real indicative thing of how they managed was, what about the division? We have to tell the division, note to file, division advised by phone. No record of going back to the division to tell them to take corrective action, no record of anything, it just handled by phone.
Very shocking. And it explains one of the reasons why it's so important that we got the files. Sid has asked me to go to you next, Todd. I guess because, like Wayne, your story didn't appear in the movie just by accident because of the way people were interviewed, but you obviously played a key role in leading the charge in this class action. And I wondered, I think I'd like to start with the fact that although Wayne sort of stumbled into the RCMP, when you were a kid growing up in New Brunswick, you were already, as a little kid, passionate about your idea of going into the armed forces. Isn't that right?
I had a long history of playing soldier. Yeah, I was in Army Cadets from the age of 12, and so grew up in St. Stephen, New Brunswick. My brother was in the Army Cadets, my sister was in the Army Cadets. I joined, excelled at it, was awarded with a trip to Germany when I was 16. 17, I was a staff sergeant at camp. At 18, I was a staff company sergeant major at camp. I was awarded as top Army Cadet in Brunswick. And it was just natural that I joined the military after. Being from a small town in New Brunswick, and I knew I was gay at the time, but I was deeply in the closet, but I wanted a career in the military. So I went to the recruiting office, took the aptitude test, and I qualified for about 90% of the jobs on the aptitude. So I thought, I'll apply for a job in the Army, a job in the Navy, and a job in the Air Force, and see which comes first. 3 weeks later, I was offered a position as a Naval Combat Information Operator, and to basic training.
And then things took a turn for the worse.
Yeah. So,
And what happened, Todd?
so I was posted to the HMC of Saskatchewan. I excelled in basic training. I loved it. Posted to the HMC of Saskatchewan in Esquimalt on the west coast. Again, Naval Combat Information Operator. I had done my trades training, went on the ship, and I was probably on the ship for about 4 months, and had just come back from a leave. And I had 3 individuals come up to me when I got back from leave saying, the Special Investigation Unit were here, and they were asking questions about your loyalty to the country, if you had ever been to Russia, and all of these strange questions. And all 3 of them ended with, and we were told not to tell you. And so I knew I was under some type of investigation, and nothing happened for a while. I was waiting. And then I was called up, so I was on the ship, we were ashore, was called up, and 2 guys in these cheap suits, that's a way to find out I was gay right there, is I identified their attire. So these 2 guys said, come with us. So I was driven away in the light blue K car, taken to the military police office on the base, and that started, that was, I think, February of 1990, so I was just turning 20 years old, and that started 18 months of interrogation by the Special Investigation Unit. In month 17, I finally told them that I was gay on a polygraph exam. So we were talking earlier today about the dark rooms. So my dark room was a room with a 2-way mirror, a desk, a huge tape recorder set up. I was hooked up to the polygraph with this strange person beside me who had been an expert flown in from Ottawa. He was apparently the top polygraph expert in the country. Admitted that I was gay. They kind of closed the book and said, all right, that's what we wanted to know. I cooperated, gave them every document I had. They came to my apartment, went through everything. They came back to me and said, you have in your possession a photograph. And in the back of the photograph, there's a radio frequency written on the wall. And because you have that, it's classified confidential, the radio frequency. We're probably going to take away your security clearance. So you have 6 months left. You'll have a choice. You'll go to general duty. You'll be sweeping the streets for the next 6 months. Or we'll give you an honorable discharge. So after 18 months, I jumped at the honorable discharge. And that was it.
Now, you were aware of the Michelle Douglas case, and you went to work for the first openly gay member of the legislature in Ontario, which is where we met. But it wasn't until many years later, in 2016, that occasion that I talked about the Just Society Committee report release, and we talked about the possibility of a class action. Why did you agree to be the leader of this class action? I mean, let's be honest, there were thousands of people out there who could have done it, but never did, for whatever reason. What led you to agree to take on that responsibility?
Yeah, and I often ask myself that question. I had met you. The military was something that I didn't talk about a lot to many people. I told people I was in the military. My very supportive partner used to love bringing up in dinner conversations when we had people over saying, tell them about the time you were kicked out of the Navy. Thanks, Kurt. But I had been involved in many causes. I helped out. Generally, I've been involved with one political party, but back in 1994, I think I helped some NDP guy in his leadership campaign. But I've always been involved. Michelle and I, the first time I met her, I fawned over her because I was a waiter and she was in my section in the restaurant. And I was like, oh my God, it's Michelle Douglas.
You were a fanboy.
Yeah, I still am. Thanks. So it's been something that's always been on my mind. I've always wanted to do something. It just never sat right with me, the fact that I was kicked out of the military. It devastated me at the time. It was something that my train was derailed when that happened. So when I was called up, Douglas, you called me up and asked me to speak at the Just Society report release, and because you knew I'd been in the military and had been kicked out. Not much other detail, because I didn't tell, unless you were at one of the dinner parties with Kurt.
No, I didn't know anything about it except that I recall once having a drink with you, and I said, "Oh, you must have had a lot of fun in the Navy," and you said, "No, I had an experience more like Michelle Douglas."
Yeah. So when you asked me about the Just Society report, I said yes right away. It was probably one of the toughest things to do, was to sit down and write out that 2-page speech for that press conference. And then I thought, well, it's a press conference in Ottawa, we're staying in the Chateau Laurier, it's going to be in their press room downstairs, nobody's going to come and see this thing. But I should probably call my mom and tell her I'm going to do this. And then when I was getting ready to go to Ottawa, they're like, yeah, we've booked the press room in the House of Commons and all the cameras will be there. And I was like, oh God, what have I done? And then shortly after that, the opportunity came up for the class action, and same thing, no hesitation, which I question why I don't, but no hesitation. At the time I was working for the president of the Métis Nation of Ontario. I was kind of their lobbyist, and thought, well, I better call them and let them know that I'm suing the federal government, because I'm supposed to be lobbying them as well. And they were super supportive. And that led the journey that Martine and Alida and I took, led by the very capable Douglas Elliott and an amazing team of lawyers.
Yes, let's be very clear. I was just the lead counsel. It was a great, great team behind me. And I wonder, just to wrap that part of the story, Todd, can you tell us about any class action when you get a settlement? It's not effective until you get court approval. And we had court approval. I see the look at Patty Gray is here, who was in the movie, and I see her, she knows exactly where I'm going with this next question. We arranged the court approval. Originally, the federal government had said, oh, why don't we just do this quietly, in a judge's office, we don't have to do anything. And I said to the judge, no, these people have been through a lot. We deserve to do this in the most dignified way possible, and I want to commend Justice St. Louis. She arranged for us to get the federal courtroom that's in the Supreme Court of Canada. It's one of the most magnificent courtrooms in the country, and she did that to honor the victims of the LGBT purge, and frankly also to make sure that we had enough room, because we weren't sure how many people were going to show up. So what was that day like, Todd?
Well, the first time I went to the Supreme Court, I went just as an observer on the same-sex marriage question, and I remember running into you and the gay minister took me to a bar and tried to buy me a lap dance, but I won't get into that story. So this time the court was quite different. It was, so we showed up in Ottawa, there were a number of survivors, and I just want to, recognize the incredible strength of all of the people who went through the LGBT purge, and you know, such amazing people with such strength. So we showed up at the courthouse. We filled up the back rows. We had 20 lawyers there, something like that. Person after person after person got up and told their story, and Justice St. Louis listened and was so accommodating, and just, you know, you felt like you were being hugged by Justice St. Louis during this. I'll note there was one person in the room who was not a fan. Was she a real woman? I think it was. Or
No, she's an evangelical Christian from the West Coast, and she wanted to come to, she wanted Justice St. Louis to hear from her because she wanted to argue that this settlement was a terrible mistake because the purge was justified.
And Justice St. Louis said no. So she sat in the corner of the courtroom just giving us evil stares. But person after person got up and spoke, and at the very end, you know, we talked to the 20 lawyers and they said, you know, normally in a few weeks we'll find out her decision. And at the end of the last person getting up, she gave her decision. And it was very favorable, and we all jumped up and hugged, and it was an incredible day.
It was great, and we did actually film a number of people, so there's footage of some of it, the people who consented. There's also some great pictures, and my favorite picture is one where I'm hugging Zian Pitt, because that picture ended up going on the cover of Canadian Lawyer magazine, so Zian became a cover girl. Before I turn to Matsun, I wanted to make another comment. As I said, we learned some new things through the course of the investigation that Sven's been doing, but one thing has not changed, and that is that we have not found a single case where a gay or lesbian person betrayed their country because of their sexuality. The Prime Minister got it right when he said, these people did not betray Canada, Canada betrayed them. I have also I come from a police family, and I can tell you I have also characterized this as the longest, most expensive, and least successful police investigation in Canadian history. It went on for 40 years, and they never charged anyone with espionage or any similar crimes.
You really look like a tote bear.
Martin Roy.
Hi.
So we saw a lot about your story in the movie, but there's a part of your story that I would like you to share with the audience, because the second time we met, not the first time, but the second time we met, you brought a whole file with you about how your parents supported you in your original struggle for justice. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So my father was working for National Film Board, and my father really wanted me to be in the army or somewhere that I love and that I succeed. So he was really proud that I was in the army. He was really proud I succeed to do the training and everything. And I still remember when I had to announce him that they arrest me and they're gonna fire me for that. He freaked out. He could not understand it. And for him, it was like his own company is firing his daughter, that it took him, I'm gonna tell you for sure, a lot to put me in the army. I didn't want to go. Okay, I was a princess, and I didn't want to go. And it took me 2 weeks to really join and all that. So I was very devastated, like I say. I was not doing well at all after it happened. But my father said, no, we're gonna fight this. And he started doing a grief. So, and the way it was working in that time is you send a letter and then they respond and you go like that all the way to the Général. And I was even looking at the letter yesterday because he wrote back to me, the Général Thériault, that was the chief, telling me, sorry, you left yourself to your sexual appetite and it's not right, and big letter. And at the end, he even says, we see that you were doing great. You were a great soldier. We're sure you're going to find something. Like, how can you say that? So my father fought and he went all the way even to Jean Sauvé, who was the gouverneur général in that time, to get an answer again, and he did that for 5 years. And for me, it was like, because I didn't have the strength. Me, I was just signing. I even remember, he told me at one point I had blank sheet, and he got me to sign a couple of them. And him and my mother were typing all those letters, and really like, and when Jean Sauvé said no, I said, okay, stop. This is it. We have to stop. We have to live. I have to go on. You know, and that was, I was lucky enough. Not everybody had a father like that. My mom was more skeptical because for her, my homosexuality did all that. It was really because I was gay that all this was happening. My father was not seeing it at all like that. So it was a great support. And one of the things is when she did the movie, both my parents were sitting just beside because we were in my parents' house that they had for 64 years. And I asked Sarah to do it there because it's when I was a kid, that's where I used to live and happen. And both my parents passed. My father died 2 months after, and then the year after my mother, so they never saw the movie, but they really participate in their own way. So.
Now, we saw the Prime Minister making the apology in Parliament, and you were there that day for the apology. Now, some people think apologies don't matter. We saw actually even one of the survivors who said, it's not going to help me. Tell us about the day of the apology and what it meant to you.
It meant everything. Because again, like I said, I was very naive at 19, 20. And even when Michel won, I even did a whole file. I did all the article, I follow it. And I was sure they were going to come and ring at the door and say, we're sorry. So from 1992 to on, I was like waiting that somebody would say something. And I want to say through that, that's how I met Lynn. And that was really like, I was in St. John working for IBM, and she found out that I was fired and they were doing a study. And it was in 2000. And it was one of the first time I was really talking about it. It was all secret and all that. And for me, it was like the beginning of talking about it. And they were key, really, and what's happening. They even work with that. So to go through all this and to finally sit down in front of, and in a way, I'm sorry to say, he is the son of Pierre-Éliott Trudeau. So for me, it was meaning something. Because, you know, that's what should have been done in 1969, not in 2017. So it really touched me, and they really did it too in a very respectful way. They placed us and our partner were behind us, and we were really in front of him, and his kids were beside too. It was really well done, and he was really looking at us. And one thing that is important is he read the story of Diane just before. So you heard her story. So you can understand that he was touched because he was really touched about it. He was really disturbed about what happened, and that's what I felt. I really felt someone that say, oh my God, you know, and really try it. I remember we were hearing the page. Each page that was turning when he did it. So it was a very, very special moment that for me, it really helped me. They really, really helped me to, you know, I don't know how you do it in life, but when you know something is wrong, it totally blow everything up, your perception of life. So for me to do that was like to bring back justice, but as well to make something make more sense, you know.
So, I also want to, one more question for you, but I want to mention another thing about that day that people don't realize, because I did hear some people suggest that when the Prime Minister was crying, he was just acting. You don't think so, neither do I. And I'll tell you one of the reasons. He was very emotional, not just, he had read the end story, but there's another reason, which you cannot see when he's speaking, is that Michelle Douglas is sitting right in front of him. And right next to Michelle Douglas are his children. And so I think he was very conscious of the harm that Canada had done, because there's the big symbol of that harm, and he wants his children to be aware of this sad part of our history and to always remember that moment of that apology. Now, Martin, we did something. We did a lot of things, but we got the case resolved. And one of the, I mentioned $145 million. It's a big number. It's very important. People got that compensation. But there were many, many good things that we got from this settlement. One of them is right, I know is very important to you, is right on your jacket. So why don't you start to talk about that, and then maybe mention some of the things that you and Todd wanted to get from the government besides the apology and financial compensation.
For sure, we wanted a medal, something, right? And that was like, and everybody wanted a medal. I asked Diane, I remember calling Diane and say, what does people want, right? And we ended up sitting down with the military and the RCMP and the public function and everything, and they looked at us like, there's no such thing. There's no medal for all three. There's medal for military, there's medal for RCMP, and there's other thing for civilian. There's nothing that we could do for all of us. So that's when that woman, that amazing woman that worked at our old office, Claire, that is passed since, that was amazing. She said there's citation. And I think there was only 7 at that point, 7 citation in Canada. And we never heard of that citation before. And it was really that decoration that you can wear this way as a civilian. And there's a bar for military or RCMP that you can wear. And then it was, what we're gonna put on it? And they were really conservateur. It was like, you remember, it was really like blood kind of color there, like very purple and very, and me, I arrived with my IBM. I was working at IBM, and IBM just changed their branding with the 8 color. And I'm like, if IBM, that is 100 years old, do that, but we should do it too. And they were like, no, we cannot do that, it's not gonna pass. And I said, well, it would be really great, you know, and if we do it, we should do it by respecting the art piece. And the art piece was done by Baker in the 70s, and it was 8 colors. And it has to be 8 colors. So they left, and they say, we'll come back. And me and Todd, we were sure they were coming back with the dark red kind of thing there. And no, they came back with this. And we were really, really, really impressed. So it was a great story, that result, and I think people are very proud of it. We even saw a military the other day after the report of Louis Arbo that was wearing his as a military. So.
Thank you. I will now go to our beloved Lynn. And Lynn, before you tell your own story, you kind of prepared a shopping list of things that you thought we should try and achieve in the class action. And it was, you kind of asked us to get you the sun, moon, and stars. How did we do?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't my shopping list, it wasn't Carmen's shopping list, it was 126 people that we interviewed. It was their shopping list, possibly maybe the last one on the shopping list I dreamed up because I spent a number of years in the military and had people in my family, like my grandfather was in the military, and I know that records live on, have a life of their own beyond even your own life. And the last point on the shopping list was to at least give the option to anybody that had been, at that time, convicted or purged from the Canadian military, the option to destroy those records so that nobody could use them or see them in the future. So that was, I think, the only one I can lay claim to, Doug. All other ones come from the interviews that we did in each and individual. Not every individual named one, but it was the culminating effect. To be compensated was one that was on the books. We did try and talk to some lawyers over the years, Carmen and I, and they said that the first one we talked to said it'll never happen. It was kind of discouraging, even for us. It was something that I thought should happen. I'd been part of that and seen, after talking to 126 people, you would want some kind of compensation for what had happened to them. And even the second lawyer said it's probably not possible. It's just not done. It just won't happen. And I want you to understand that we interviewed military people, so our focus then was primarily on the military. We didn't connect with and extend to the RCMP or the civil service. Though I suspected and knew it happened in 1988, I had a really good friend that was playing broomball. She was actually the captain of the team of Edmonton at the time, and she left the military because they were chasing her out because they were sure after the queers back then. And she actually joined the RCMP in 1988. Yeah, so, progress does happen in weird ways, or else they just put their hands over the ears and don't know any different. But, so that was one of the main things, was that. One of them was as well, we heard people talk about not just compensation, but recognition, the medal, but I'm really proud and happy that Maxine and Todd found a way to get one that would cut across all three or all areas, so that it's a citation and not just a military medal in that, because military people, all people are like to be recognized, I think, and it's at least a recognition, while painful at another level. I think it stands up and says something for these people.
So, Lynn, one of the things that I think your research was really important was to make these people aware of the fact that they weren't alone, and that they were entitled to some kind of justice. And it wasn't a direct result, but an indirect result of the class action was their recognition as veterans and access to veterans benefits. So can you explain to us, there were a lot of people in the class who didn't think they were entitled to veterans benefits. They weren't legitimate veterans. But that changed, didn't it?
Yeah, like we did our research, and because of that research, there's people that we hadn't interviewed, and you find out that they had been in the military. One of them, she had been purged. I think it was just too difficult for her. She would have never put in a claim, let alone believed that she was deserving of any kind of pension or anything. She sat at our kitchen table and she told us the story, Carmen and she told us the story and rewrote the story down for her, and then we would read it back to her, and that was the story that was submitted. So I think there's lots of people in those situations. There's other people that served many years, they lived through the purge, they survived and continued to serve their country, but they were afflicted by all of that years of purging, and Some of those didn't believe that they would deserve any compensation either. And, you know, at some point in time, I was trying to encourage people to go out there, and it was one of my best friends that when I joined the military, we ended up in a base in Comox. This is how long she'd been with me, and of course I knew she'd been through the same thing as me. And I don't think she would have put it in, and you know, I phoned her about the second last day. I hadn't finished my claim either. And I said, and she said, Lynn, I don't know if I can finish it. It hurts too much. You have to remember, you have to relive those things. And she had never been purged from the military. She left the military on her own volition. She had about I can't remember how many years, 12, 14 years. So people would leave and they were caused a lot of hurt. And she would have never put in a claim. She would have never gotten what she got. So I'm not trying to say that, you know, I encouraged them, but I tried to, because at that point I started to say when I was talking to people, you know, if you can't do it, it's okay. It's really okay if you can't put a claim in, because we know that you have to relive and re-talk about what happened. And I think that happens in any class action suit, whether it's Indigenous peoples or the LGBT veterans. You have to be able to talk about the pain. And there's so many people that were never able to talk about the pain and to realize and come forth and get the pensions that they probably should have today, and they still can't talk about it. So they're still living through that even to this day.
So, final question to you, Lynn. You're teaching young people today who have grown up in an era where equal marriage was always possible, where the purge had ended. What lessons do you think that the younger generation should take from the story of the LGBT purge? What do you want them to learn from that and to take into their lives as they go forward into the workforce and being part of Canadian society?
Well, I think in part from universities, from just presenting to the young people in different various ways, I oftentimes show them the fruit machine since it's been produced. I wanted to say that and thank Sarah Foddy and for everybody that were interviewed in that movie, because it is the starting point to talk about this. It's an excellent starting point for them to realize that there is such a history and to get a sense of that history. And I've actually invited people, whether they were part of the movie or whether they were survivors, to come and sit in front of classes or university people and to respond to questions afterwards. And some of the young people are very amazing. They're very thankful. And I think one of the things that I try and say to them is just to remember to take this forward, because history can happen again. History, what happened, is not to be said that this is now going to live on forever. We live in a fragile world, and just to remember it so that it doesn't happen again, and to move forward with that. To try and make sure that you live your lives for other marginalized groups so that something like this doesn't happen again for other people, not just veterans, but for other people in other groups.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Let's thank all of our panelists for their service to our country and for their presentations this evening. I just want to make two final points. One is, if you liked the movie The Fruit Machine, it is available now on DVD in English with French subtitles, as you saw tonight, and it's also available in a dubbed French version. I sound like Charles Aznavour in the movie, but it's dubbed in French. I also want to remind everyone, tomorrow we have a really exciting program at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights about the upcoming exhibit that is part of one of the outcomes from the LGBT purge class action. And you've heard us all talk about Sven Robinson tonight, but you'll hear Sven Robinson talk tomorrow. So we hope to see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Douglas. If you ever decide to retire as a lawyer, I think you'll make a great TV talk show host. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Elder Albert, for opening this session in a good way. Thank you to RRC for creating this space to learn and to share and to grow. Thank you all for being here, and look forward to seeing you at the CNHR to do more learning, to do more feeling, and figure out ways we can act to make better worlds for everybody. So thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. We'll see you soon.
I feel like I have to end this video on your shirt because it's so perfect. Right? Celebration, affirmation. Beautiful, thank you. So there you have it. I mean, you know, like, I don't even know what to say. Like, that's, yeah, I'm really happy I came. I was thinking that I might have just gone to my hotel room and chilled out, but this was brilliant. So, and just reminds us that, you know, when you think that, oh yeah, Canada is this place of refuge and it's whatever, that there's a history here. So many parts of the world where people are fleeing because there's a certain history there. Just know that there's a time in this country when the histories was similar. I mean, you know, and also I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, I moved here in 1978 and I thought Canada was all these things, but I'm hearing these dates now that say that I was living in a place where I was actually living in a precarious way that was quite vulnerable, that shit could have gone down in my life. But you know, I got involved in movements and organized and participated in making a difference. So there you have it. What can I say? Nothing more. I mean, it was powerful. I mean, all kinds of emotional waves through that. So here we are in Winnipeg, learning a lot about history here in this country. Here's people just hanging out. And yeah.